On the morning of June 10, 2001, Timothy McVeigh woke up in his death row cell with a clear realization. He had less than 24 hours to live. No nightmares, no screaming. Only the stillness of a man who has accepted his fate, or perhaps actively chose it long before. The 8x12-foot room at the Federal Correctional Complex in Terre Haute, Indiana, became his entire universe in these final days. 4 cold gray walls, a hard bed with a thin mattress, a sink, a toilet, everything a person needs to survive, but nothing more. This is not a place to live, but a place to wait for death. McVeigh was used to this. Since 1997, he has been held in the death row section under strict 24-hour-a-day, 7-days-a-week surveillance. The surveillance camera recorded every movement of his, when he slept, when he was awake, when he read a book, or when he stared at the ceiling. The prison staff always knew what he was doing. They knew who he was, the most notorious domestic terrorist in American history, the man who murdered 168 innocent people, including 19 children, with a bomb packed into a truck parked outside the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City on April 19, 1995. Some employees feel intimidated when working near him. Others felt outraged, but they all had to complete their tasks with cold professionalism because this is the justice system, and the system is never allowed to have emotions. At 7:30 in the morning, McVeigh was served a standard breakfast: scrambled eggs, oatmeal, toast, fruit, and milk. He ate methodically, as if this were just another morning among countless others. For McVeigh, discipline was everything. He was a soldier who served in the Gulf War and was awarded the Bronze Star Medal for combat bravery. Military life instilled in him strict habits: waking up on time, eating on time, doing everything according to the correct procedure. Even knowing he was about to die, he still didn't break that habit. Perhaps that was the only way he could keep himself from collapsing. Or perhaps he truly felt no fear at all. At 8:30, McVeigh was led to take a shower. Then, he returned to his cell and spent the next few hours reading and writing. The pages in front of him were his only friends at that moment. No family, no true friends. Only he, his thoughts and the words on paper. The final words he wanted to leave for a world he believed had betrayed him. At 10 o'clock in the morning, Timothy McVeigh met with his lawyers, Rob Nye and Nathan Chambers. This is not a meeting to discuss any remaining appeals or legal strategies. All those roads have been blocked for a long time. This meeting is only to ensure that McVeigh's final rights will be respected until the very last moment. The two lawyers sat opposite their clients behind thick glass, speaking through telephones. They had worked with McVeigh for years, but now there was nothing left to argue about. All that remained were the cold administrative procedures of death. McVeigh listened, nodded, and was almost coldly calm. He didn't show any fear, didn't seek comfort. He accepted death as if it were part of the plan from the beginning, and perhaps for him, it truly was. In his final days, McVeigh requested several personal items to accompany him: a dictionary, a copy of the Declaration of Independence, and a collection of works by Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius. These choices are not random. They reflect how you see yourself: a patriotic warrior, a man fighting against a government he believes has become authoritarian. The Declaration of Independence reminds you of the people's right to revolution when the government becomes oppressive. Marcus Aurelius taught him about resilience, about accepting fate with a steadfast mind. For McVeigh, these texts were not just books. They were weapons of thought, the very reason for his existence even in these final hours. He murdered 168 people, including 19 children who were in the daycare center at the Murrah Building. But in his twisted mind, he wasn't a serial killer. He was a warrior who had launched an attack against the state apparatus. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Father Charles Smith, a Catholic priest, entered the cell to meet McVeigh. Father Smith was his spiritual advisor throughout his time on death row, although McVeigh's relationship with faith was always very complex. He grew up in a Catholic family, but as an adult, he calls himself an agnostic. The conversation between the two was kept secret, but it can be guessed that they discussed the soul and what awaits after death. McVeigh, who always prided himself on his practicality, did he really believe in an afterlife? Or are you simply seeking a little comfort before facing the void? These questions never have clear answers. But in these moments, even a tough man like McVeigh might have felt terrifyingly alone, and perhaps faith, however fragile, was the only thing that could touch that loneliness. Outside the prison, the media storm is gradually reaching its peak. Dozens of reporters from across the United States and around the world gathered, set up cameras, and prepared to record the historic moment, the first federal execution since 1963. The crowd gathered on two sides. On one side were supporters of the death penalty, holding signs demanding justice for the Oklahoma City victims. On the other side were opponents of the death penalty who believed that no crime, no matter how terrible, could justify the state killing someone. Amidst the two streams of people, the line between justice and revenge becomes blurred. And within the prison walls, Timothy McVeigh, the man at the center of it all, continued to read, write, and wait. As night fell over Terre Haute, Timothy McVeigh faced his final meal. There was no fancy steak, no wine, no lobster. Things that many other death row inmates often choose as a way to enjoy the last pleasures of their lives. McVeigh only requested 2 boxes of mint chocolate chip ice cream. It was a strangely simple choice, reminiscent of childhood, of bright summer days when life hadn't yet twisted into tragedy. Perhaps in that moment, as the melting ice cream slowly slid over his tongue, McVeigh returned to a younger version of himself, before the military, before the war, before hatred consumed everything human that remained within him. But that moment was fleeting. Reality doesn't allow you to run away any longer. 2 boxes of ice cream vanished, and with them, the last vestiges of innocence disappeared as well. Medical staff arrived to ask if McVeigh wanted to take a sedative, a standard procedure to help death row inmates reduce anxiety on their final night. He refused. McVeigh wanted to face death completely sober, with nothing clouding his mind or weakening his will. This is not the time to hide or seek comfort. For him, this is the ultimate challenge, a way to prove that he is still the master of himself, even when everything else has been taken away. In the U.S. execution system, death row inmates are typically injected with 3 chemicals in sequence. First, sodium thiopental to induce anesthesia. Then, pancuronium bromide to paralyze muscles and stop breathing. And finally, potassium chloride to stop the heart. This process is designed to look humane, but human rights activists have argued that it could cause terrible pain if the anesthetic dose is insufficient. McVeigh knew this. He studied his death as if it were a military mission that needed careful preparation. The night became strangely quiet. The light in the cell dimmed, but never completely turned off. In the execution chamber, darkness was never allowed to exist completely. McVeigh lay on the hard bed, looking up at the ceiling. Many death row inmates couldn't sleep on their final night. They wrestled with their thoughts, with regret, and with the fear of impending death. But McVeigh was different. He slept for a few hours, a deep, peaceful sleep that even the camera operators were surprised by. Perhaps this is a testament to his absolute coldness, or perhaps this is the result of years of military discipline, the ability to sleep anywhere, anytime, because a warrior must know how to conserve energy for the upcoming battle. Outside the cell, Terre Haute prison became as taut as an overstretched guitar string. The executioners rehearsed the procedure many times. Every step, every gesture, every second was precisely calculated. They have to ensure everything goes smoothly without any mistakes. This isn't just an ordinary execution. This is the first federal execution in 38 years, and the whole world is watching. The pressure weighed not only on McVeigh's shoulders, but also on everyone involved in the event. And while everyone around is stressed and worried, the main character of this play is fast asleep. 4 o'clock in the morning on June 11th, 2001. The lights in the cell came on completely. Timothy McVeigh woke up, or perhaps he hadn't really slept in these final hours. The prison staff entered with serious expressions, not saying much. They knew what they were doing, and so did McVeigh. He was taken to bathe one last time, then put on the standard uniform, a white shirt, khaki pants, and sneakers. Nothing special. There are no rituals, only mechanical movements repeated over and over according to a procedure rehearsed hundreds of times. McVeigh cooperated fully, did not resist, and showed no fear. He handled each step as if it were just another military task, a final mission to be completed with discipline and honor. 6:45. The cell door opened. This is the time. McVeigh walked out of the room that had held him in his final days, down a narrow hallway flanked by security guards. His steps were steady, without wavering or hesitation. The distance from the cell to the execution chamber wasn't very long, only a few dozen steps, but each step carried an irreversible finality. This is a path from which no one can turn back, and McVeigh had no intention of turning back. He chose this path a long time ago, from the day he decided to drive the bomb truck to the Murrah building, from the day he pressed the detonator and walked away, leaving behind 168 shattered lives. Now, it's your turn to enter the room where death awaits. The execution room was cold, clean, and strangely empty. In the middle of the room was a stretcher, a metal bed with leather straps to restrain the arms, legs, and body. The fluorescent lights shone brightly, leaving no dark corners. McVeigh was instructed to lie down. The staff began their work, tying wrists, ankles, and wrapping ropes around the body. McVeigh lay still, looking up at the ceiling, or more precisely, looking into the camera that was broadcasting his image live to Oklahoma City, where over 232 victims and their families were sitting in a dark room, staring at a large screen, waiting for the moment justice would be served. The IV line is inserted into his right leg. The slender plastic tube will deliver the deadly chemical mixture into his body in a few minutes. 3 chemicals: sodium thiopental for deep anesthesia, pancuronium bromide for total body paralysis and respiratory arrest, and potassium chloride to stop the heart. 3 steps, 3 types of medication, 3 minutes to end a life. The witnesses began to enter the 3 rooms separated by thick glass. 10 people sat in the main room, facing McVeigh across the glass. They are the people who lost loved ones in the bombing, the ones who have been waiting for this moment for the past 6 years. Warden Harley Lappin approached McVeigh and asked the standard question. "Do you have any last words?" McVeigh turned to look at the witnesses, his gaze sweeping over each one. Without fear, without regret, only absolute coldness. Then he shook his head. There's no apology. There is no explanation. But he left a handwritten statement, the full text of the poem Invictus by the English poet William Ernest Henley, with the final lines echoing like a challenge. "I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul." 7:10. The warden nodded in agreement. The first drug began flowing into McVeigh's vein. He closed his eyes. A minute later, the second dose. Then, the third medicine. No cries, no convulsions. There was only absolute silence. At 7:14, the doctor checked and nodded. Timothy McVeigh is dead. This is the first federal execution in the United States in 38 years, since 1963. A dark chapter in American history officially closes. Outside the prison, the reaction was sharply divided. A group of people cheered and clapped. They believed that justice had finally been served. The other group was silent, some crying. They saw this not as a victory, but as a tragedy upon tragedy. McVeigh's body was cremated, and his ashes were scattered at a secret location. There is no tombstone. There is no memorial. He left no legacy other than the pain of 168 families and the eternally unanswered question, how could a person become so cold? How can hatred consume all humanity? And does the death of the terrorist truly bring justice, or is it merely a legalized form of revenge? Timothy McVeigh's final 24 hours ended in absolute coldness. No tears, no remorse, no apologies. He lived and died like a warrior in a war that only he believed in. But in the legacy he left behind, there is only the blood and tears of innocent people. And the question remains, hanging in the air, where is the line between justice and revenge? What lessons do we learn from tragedies like this?